Thank you very much, Catherine. And just to say, for everyone who is in this room, just a massive thank you from the outset. The other two speakers are Rob Breener and Carrie Cooper, and I recommended both of them to come and speak here today because they are awesome speakers. And not that I'm competitive at all, but yeah, I've got quite a lot of people in this room. Hurrah. Anyway, but honestly do. If you can watch the other talks afterwards, then do please listen to those as well, because they will be really good talks that will be worth your time listening to later. Okay, so what am I talking about today? I think social well-being is almost best defined by putting it in context with the other types of well-being. I'm not going to define all of those because you're probably going to have that to death by the end of today. But social well-being, as far as the research is concerned, is the ability to communicate and develop meaningful relationships with others and maintain a support network. And what's the research evidence behind it? So if we go right back to basics, back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a psychologist called Harlow. And some of the experiments that he did on primates were really quite horrific and shocking. So this is a monkey who, with a fear stimulus, i.e. a yapping, barking dog, goes and clings to the mother that provides it with comfort and warmth, as opposed to the mother on the right that provides with nutrition and sustenance. The need for connection is stronger in primates. The social isolation chamber, leaving monkeys in a chamber for a year, leads to them being completely unable to communicate and build relationships with other monkeys, resulting in them not being able to eat, starving themselves to death. Now, these are just monkeys, I hear you say. Well, what about humans? Well, if we look at humans, then people who are more isolated, who are more lonely, who don't have strong support networks around them, have an increased likelihood of death. And there's a meta-analytic review for those of you who are interested. And a meta-analysis is the sort of things where you combine all of the research that's ever been done, really, in a particular area. And again, social isolation, living alone, corresponds to an increased likelihood of mortality. Put quite simply, we do need connection. It is important, and it's a significant driver. If you are interested, this is not a good research study on the basis that it isn't kind of dual experiment. You're not looking at two different groups, experimental conditions, and so on and so forth, but it is a great TED Talk. It's one of those sort of heartwarming TED Talks, and it looks at a very privileged group of people and a very underprivileged group of people on a longitudinal basis over the course of their lives. It is only men. But over the course of their lives, the people who have the greatest relationships are those that live longer. Okay, so that's, if you like, a kind of a whistle-stop tour about why social need and social closeness is important for us. But actually, so what? You guys are all here and we're kind of exploring this in the context of the world of work. Now, there has been a huge amount of research done on what are the main factors that drive why it is we actually want to go to work. And I'm not going to try and build the case between engaged employees being employees that are probably more productive at work. I think that probably has been done, and it's kind of outside the remit of this talk. However, if you were to look at those factors, so what are the main things that drive people at work? This is pretty much it. Work that helps other people, right? This is why people get out of bed in the morning. Work that is engaging. Things that don't have too many negatives. So yes, pay is important, but it's more important from the point of view that it is a demotivator, right? So I can cope with a low salary if everybody else that I'm working with is in the same boat as me. But the minute someone gets paid twice as much as me for doing the same job, you know what? That actually really pisses me off. And that's more likely to be when I get hacked off and want to leave. So it's not a motivator, it's a demotivator. Work which matches skills and abilities, work-life balance, so there's need for flexible working, and work where you have supportive colleagues. Now, if we look at that, 3 of them, so these are the top reasons why people get out of bed in the morning, 3 of those are driven very much from the perspective of meeting this need for connection, right? This need for social well-being. We've got another couple, the work that is engaging and work which matches skills and abilities, which I would say taps very much into the kind of the mental well-being case, the emotional well-being. Now, fine, we know that people are driven to build social connections at work, but why else should we care? Well, I think that there is a very, very large and significant movement towards increased transparency. And people who have bad relationships at work, the manager that they can't stand, I think there's increased exposure to those sorts of things. Has anyone heard of the rise, I guess, of the B corporations? Whether or not you believe it or not, so this isn't research evidence, but this is sort of stuff that's claimed on Forbes and those sorts of websites. Companies that are B certified are growing 28 times as fast as companies that aren't. So back in some of the earlier sessions, we were hearing about, people are caring slightly more about the businesses that are driving towards social community, sustainability, and so on and so forth. That's really the sorts of organizations that get this sort of B corporation, the B certification. It is interesting. People who are B certified are saying that this is helping them find new markets, new customers. I want to spend a little bit of time going through, I guess, some ideas, because I think when it comes to social well-being, there is an awful lot that can be done that organizations could potentially do, but I don't think are doing them yet. So a lot of the time when I speak from a position of sharing research and sharing evidence, I care about stuff that actually makes a difference. I'm not talking about fluff, I'm not talking about opinion. However, today, there isn't a lot of evidence behind some of the things I'm saying, as in the next things going forward. The reason I want to share them with you is because actually I want people to start thinking about them. I would love you to start doing them. But more importantly, I want you to start measuring it. Okay, at the moment, as far as the research is concerned, so in terms of the knowns and the unknowns, we are missing a massive amount of research in terms of pre and post evaluation. We get a lot of survey-based work. This is one of them, so about to start off on that note. But there isn't enough research looking at what is the pre, what is the intervention, and what conclusions can we draw from that 3 or 4 years later. There is a massive difference between intention and reality. And always things are started off with a good intention. Think of your New Year's resolution. Great, I've made a New Year's resolution, but am I still sticking to it on the 31st of December? That's actually the more important question. Okay, so according to MetLife, and I think they are actually here today, and by the way, slight beef with them. They don't say anything about the number of organizations that they've surveyed or the number of people that have responded, right? Definitely not an academic study. But according to their latest survey, the factor that's most driving what people want out of work is that people value and trust flexibility over and above any other employee benefit. What are the organizations that seem to be picking up on this kind of need, if you like, to fuel the social well-being, the need that people have? So who here has heard of Monzo Bank? Okay, they are one of the fastest growing retail banks in the UK. If you look at the last point here, I don't know if you can read that, but Monzo are very much taking into mind, I guess, this idea that no longer are jobs for life, right? If Monzo are a startup, which they are, then actually it's probably unreasonable for them to pretend that any employee that they hire is going to be there at the age of 65 or 70. So actually what they do is we say this: you can take an additional month of unpaid leave, right? So it costs them nothing to give their employees work a month, personal projects, travel further afield, learn a new language, take an intensive pasta-making course, or something else. And make no mistake, the reason they do this is because what they are trying to create for people is a sense of personal responsibility, that your next job is not going to be provided for by us, because we might go bankrupt in 5 years. Just out of curiosity, do you know what proportion of FTSE 100 businesses are still in the FTSE 100 from the year 2000? Anyone got a guess? It's just under 50%. Right, so even the really large corporations cannot guarantee that they will still be in the FTSE 100 in 20 years' time, or just under 20 years' time. All right? It is unreasonable to be giving people a mindset that you will be providing them with the job for life. Other organizations, is it just Monzo? No, it's not. Let's look at Google, same thing. Enjoy your quality time. We get that you need time off for personal reasons. Spend time with your family. This importance about flexibility, allowing employees to meet their social needs outside of work. Investing in you, the same idea as Monzo. Your future career will probably lie outside of this organization. Spend 1 day every 2 weeks working on your own startup idea. All right? They do not want the burden of employees in their 40s and 50s turning around saying, hey, what are you going to do for me now? What's my next learning and development opportunity? I've already reached a high level. What's next? Think for yourself. Own it for yourself. And by the way, that mindset, that sense of personal responsibility, is also associated with people who have highest levels of mental well-being. Indeed, Airbnb, there's lots more. Now, if this was not a rising trend, I wouldn't be sharing these slides. But this is a rising trend. So it's something to take note of. So in this era of a no job for life, I want to kind of give you some practical tips for where I think you as organizations and leaders in those organizations can do some quite impressive and clever things that not enough people are yet doing to really capitalize on this idea of meeting the social needs and the well-being of their employees. Okay, so let's start with attraction. I'm actually doing a career change survey at the moment. This is hot off the press because this is based on, so far, over 300 respondents. So this is a skewed audience, right? This is an audience of people who do want to change careers. So this is like from places like Career Shifters and Escape the City and flexi working and jobs for mums and all those sorts of things. But the reason I think that this is interesting is because the largest group of people that organizations like you might want to consider going forward, given that you're not providing jobs for life, are the people who are thinking about changing jobs. So people who are thinking about changing jobs, look at the one that's most important. Opportunities to talk to and shadow experts doing the jobs they'd like to learn more about. Because if you've got a 50-year career, right, no longer do you want to do the same job forever and a day. You know, the number of people who are thinking about changing jobs at any one time is about 47%. You know, a lot of the time organizations spend huge amounts of time and energy working on things like employee engagement. Well, you know what? You can drag a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Sometimes your best strategy for engaging employees is actually to let people go who are no longer right for your organization. Values change over time. Needs change over time. And social needs definitely change over time. What drives most people in their early 20s is not what drives them in their late 30s, early 40s. You know, and those sorts of needs, the social needs, spending time with family, spending time with friends, become more important as your drive to acquire gets met. So once you've started to get a mortgage, once you've started to pay off debts, then actually other things start to become more important. But again, if you look at some of the other things, so you've got opportunity to talk to and shadow, having an on-site career coach, job flexibility, right? Some of the key things there are meeting social need. The one that arguably isn't, psychometric tests, not so high. Again, in this era of career change, of no jobs for life, I see a massive opportunity for age-targeted recruitment cohorts, all right? So for example, organizations, perhaps for the ones who are inundated with hundreds of thousands of applications, this is not necessarily your thing. Places like the NHS have 100,000 vacancies that they cannot fill. Now, all of a sudden, you say, right, we're wanting to take on people in their 40s, and we want to put you through a training course program. Very, very attractive proposition. I know of the number of returnship programs has gone from 3 in 2014 to 49 now. But that's returnship programs. I think that's really missing a trick. I think the number of people that I come across, mums around the school gate, don't always want to go back to what they've already done. Actually, this is a great opportunity to learn something new. So I want to see more career changer programs. Selection processes. I think as far as most selection processes are concerned, certainly the research on this has been done. All right? Recruitment that focuses on an assumption, if you like, that the recruiter is best placed to make a selection decision is wrong. The reality is people, generally speaking, tend to want to do jobs that they're going to be good at. There are not many people out there who want to fail at the job they're going to go and do. So I'd like to see selection processes move towards opportunities to let people self-select, all right? Going back to that thing about giving people an opportunity to shadow the jobs that they currently do, well, let them make an informed decision. Let them go out and meet the people they're actually going to work with. Meet the team they will actually be joining. It's free. It costs nothing to do it. And the research evidence behind it is compelling. So for example, if you give people an opportunity to go and shadow jobs before they go and do them, their chance of completing things like nursing qualifications increases by 60%. Companies that introduce it and say, we get fed up with employee turnover. Do you know what? Come and do it. Come and experience the job for a couple of days first before you put in your application. See turnover drop by 35%. Huge opportunity to allow people to self-select and to observe and engage in the social reality of what that company can provide them. Learning and development, or opportunities for people to experience and acquire, if you like, learning and development opportunities is an incredibly strong employee benefit. It is the strongest employee benefit that you can offer, because there are 42% of people see this as being the most important thing that they're looking for when they're looking for an employer, or what they're looking for when they're evaluating an employer. This is a research study really showing, it was by Heery and Villani in 2006, and it was only 30 students, so it's actually probably not the strongest study in the world. But what I like about it is the people were playing an avatar, and the avatar, one tiny cue, raised an eyebrow every time they were about to play rock. And that took the respondents' skill level from winning rock, paper, scissors at 33% of the time up to 44% of the time. And when you ask people, why did your score improve? A, they didn't realize that their scores were improving, but B, they had absolutely no idea of what the social cues were that were getting them to play rock, paper, scissors in response to the fact that the guy was basically giving a cue to say, I'm about to play rock. So what people learn in a social context through very subtle cues is very often missed through a lot of the things that are kind of designed, if you like, around that learning and development opportunity. So the reason I'm saying this is because most companies spend an inordinate amount of money on things like e-learning, but it is the form of learning people like the least. It is free to do things like peer networking groups. It is free to go and job shadow people in other groups. And you know what's interesting about that? Is that when people go and spend time doing a job or observing a job that they haven't done before, it makes them realize they can do it, and particularly for women. So when you hear companies saying, we don't get enough senior women applying for our jobs, the reason is because your recruitment's broken. It's not the women that are broken. So you give women a chance to experience the job that they're thinking about doing, not even thinking about doing. Ask them to do it anyway. And when they realize they can, they will apply for it. Confidence is not built in a power pose. It's built through knowledge and experience. There's also an important point about networking. All right, if you had a company policy that said 2 days a year, 3 days a year, you have to spend time in a different department, go and spend time understanding what that role is about. You increase the knowledge of those different businesses. You build networks that are meaningful because actually you understand what people are doing in different departments. You're building opportunities for networking. And all of a sudden that removes the whole need for people to be confident, probably slightly more extrovert, probably slightly more proactive. This sort of an idea of giving people opportunities to network that you as a company are instigating will really benefit, in particular, people from social minorities and women. One of the organizations that I've seen do this really well is actually Accenture. They've developed an app for all new grads coming in where they basically say, right, day one, the app says you have to go and introduce yourself to somebody else in your department. Day two, go and introduce yourself to the most senior person. Day three, go and introduce yourself to someone in another department. Day four, come and share that back as part of your cohort group again. And what that does is it creates psychological license and psychological safety, right? All of a sudden, instead of me needing to be confident, I can actually, sorry, I'm so sorry to take up your time, but I've got this app that needs me to do this. Yeah, I went to a talk at London Business School, and the woman was saying, I just had this cringy networking session where people are told that they've got to make eye contact, they've got to invite themselves into a session. And I'm sitting there saying, why on earth are we trying to fix the human when actually it's the networking scenario that's broken? Right? We know that people don't like those situations, so why are we trying to train people to be better in them? You can use technology, you can use a career coach internally to get people to introduce themselves to each other. You know, that whole need for personal connection can easily be facilitated. And if you want some ideas and tips on that, very happy to share. But the point is that's far more likely to meet a need than the things like the investment in e-learning that I see going forward. And that's not, I don't mean to slag it off, and it's very, very good for meeting its own needs. But, you know, if you're wanting to develop interpersonal skills, the sorts of things going forward, higher level cognitive reasoning, judgment, analytical, managerial skills, it's not the way to go. I think in terms of employee benefits, so yes, we do know that people do care about the benefits that you as an employer will be providing. But the group on the left, I would say, are the sort of the benefits that were harked on and told about, decade ago or so, or even maybe still today. But going forward, this is much more likely to be the sorts of benefits that will be tapping into this social need that people so desperately seek and want. And I think the other opportunity that I think companies have is really around building alumni networks. So, you know, again, in this era of no jobs for life, there is a real opportunity around people who maybe spend 10 years at your company and love it. They've had a wonderful time. But you know what? The grass is not always greener, but maybe they need to see that and experience it for themselves. Encourage a positive leaving, because they're not going to be with you for 50 years. They just won't be, and you don't want them there for 50 years either. That's expensive. All right, but a lot of the time, let people leave, keep in touch with them. Maybe they want to come back after 8 years. Maybe they want to come back after 20 years. But if they've spent time in your client organizations, or if they've spent time in not-for-profit organizations, charities, whatever it is, that experience and that skill level that you can build up externally is going to be of value at some point, potentially in the future. You know, there's a lot of money that's spent on recruitment consultants that I really don't think needs to be. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I think the point I wanted to kind of get across to you today was really the fact that there are so many opportunities for companies to do more, to bring out the natural skills, the natural desires that your employees already have that we're just not doing and not even beginning to touch on yet. So if there's anything that you take away from that, please experiment. And if you do experiment, come back and talk about it at an APP event in a few years' time.